1 month. I've made it 1 month. Today is June 22nd, which means it's been exactly 1 month since I got rid of my scale. I will talk more about that later and how this month has been, but I just wanted to share, we've got kind of an unexpected thing going on today. Yesterday, I had an appointment with my surgeon because I've been dealing with an infection in my central line, and it's a mild infection, but it's still enough that the line has to be removed. He's like, yeah, we need to take that out like tomorrow, which is now today. Now the problem with this, it has been exactly 1 month since I have known anything about my weight. They have to use anesthesia today because this has to be done in the OR with all of the potential complications that could go wrong with EDS and my other chronic illnesses. They have to know my weight to dose the anesthesia. It's not something that is an option. I don't know my weight. They usually ask me and I tell them. I'm going to have to speak up today and be like, somehow make sure that even though they will have to weigh me, have to let them know that, hey, guess what? I can't look at the number. Please do not write the number down anywhere. Kind of freaking out. Did a ED voice versus healthy self voice dialogue shortly before this. Now I got to get packed to go to the hospital. We're now here in the car down at the hospital getting ready for them to come get me. This was a completely unexpected thing that we're having to do. And as I mentioned already, the anesthesia is what has me worried the most because they have to know my weight for that, which means they have to weigh me. So I'm freaking out about first, this being the literal month anniversary of me not having my scale anniversary. The month mark of me not having my scale. And I don't want, as much as the eating disorder voice wants me to know the number, I don't want to willingly go backwards by not speaking up. So Roger helped me write out a little note here. We basically have just said, hey, I'm currently in recovery from an eating disorder, not allowed to know my weight. I know I have to be weighed for dosing purposes, but it is vital that I don't see or hear the number, including my BMI as well while I am there, and that it is not included on any paperwork I will receive, even on my chart or in my after visit summary. My dietitian's monitoring my weight for me. This is extremely important. And he helped me write that out because he will be able to go back with me to a certain point. But then, of course, since I'm having surgery, he will not be able to stay with me the whole time. And I know myself well enough to know that with sensory overload, all of the lights, all of the sounds, all of the stress of having a procedure, because it's always really hard on my body, even though it's a very simple procedure today, I will freeze up and not be able to speak up for myself. So figured, why not come armed? I just have to also make sure that I don't know that number. Otherwise, this entire past month of not knowing it will possibly have been for naught. However, sorry, I keep looking to make sure they're not coming out to get me just yet. What I was getting ready to say is another obstacle that I'm facing today is that I was told before this procedure today not to eat or drink anything after midnight last night. The timing. I know my brain. I know the fact that the biology of someone that has a restrictive eating disorder is very, very easily tripped into restriction mode. And I know that going, even if it's for a medical reason, without food for an extended period of time at this point, trips that switch in my brain that just says, hey, guess what? This feels good. This is what you can do. This is the way. This is what works. And I was talking to my coach. And I'm like, okay. I also emailed this to my dietitian. I know that's going to happen. I know that that's where my mind's going to want to go specifically after this. But I'm acknowledging it to you all right now as a source of accountability, because if I just kind of kept it to myself, then I know that the eating disorder would use that as an excuse to, I don't know, like they always say, if you give it an inch, it takes a mile, even if it's an unintentional inch because it's a medical reason that you have to do something. All that said, got an email back from my dietitian this morning as well that said, maybe you should think about planning ahead for afterwards so something is ready to go when you get home. So I do have plans sort of loosely. I will not cave to the voice that I know is going to be screaming at me, because it already is, because it's already been a while since I've not been able to have any type of nourishment. And the fact that I'm worried about that honestly is a good sign. Taking that as a good sign, because there were times even a few weeks or a couple months ago, I would have loved the opportunity to be told, hey, don't eat. And by the way, we're going to weigh you and you get to know it. And like I said, while the disordered voice is still saying, oh my gosh, yeah, you need to know it. So just don't speak up. And, oh, you should be happy that you're not eating. I'm not. I'm scared because I know that recovery is fragile and I'm still sort of in the beginning stages since I've just restarted with my new team. So, oh boy. Okay. Gonna go armed in. The nurse is getting ready to come out to pick me up and take me in and get me ready in pre-op and all that. So really, I'm really freaking out. Just hoping this is enough, because I don't want to have to deal with the fallout of that. But again, the fact that I'm aware of that, the fact that I'm acknowledging it, the fact that I am worried about that shows that even though recovery has felt very difficult lately and not felt like something I want to do, there is that healthy self in there. It's in there. It's not always very loud, but it's in there. I wouldn't be worried about this if it weren't. I would just be glad for the excuse to not eat. So here we go. Here, getting ready to go back. I had to get an IV go into my hand, which I haven't had to do for years because of my central line, but since that's what we're having taken out today, they had to do that. I'm just glad they were able to get it, and getting ready to say goodbye to this line until the more permanent one can be placed. It's the next day and I am sore. Honestly, just dealing with some post-op pain. However, the only reason I'm sitting up is I just had an appointment with my dietitian, which was rescheduled because it was originally going to be right at the time that I had this done yesterday. So didn't really get to give much, if any, of an update after the procedure, but things went so well. Everyone was so accommodating in every way and could not have gone better, honestly. Went much better than we ever thought that it would have. Thankfully, Roger was able to be with me in the pre-op room, so he was able to help me communicate everything that we had written on that paper about me not being able to know my weight. We were able to communicate that, or rather, he was able to help me communicate that because I was dealing with major sensory overload and was kind of frozen and could not really think straight to communicate, but he helped me explain to the surgeon, to the anesthesiologist, to the nurses that were working with me exactly how important it was for me not to know my weight, not to know the BMI that they used to calculate anesthesia dosing, which BMI is bullcrap anyway, but they still have to use it because it's the medical system. But they were super accommodating, and my surgeon even told us, he's like, now I don't think that I can take it off of the notes in my chart, so if you're on the My Chart app after the appointment and you're checking the notes from the procedure, there's a good chance that you'll see it. He said the only option I really have there, if you don't want to see it, is to mark all of the notes from today's procedure as unshareable. And then he said, but I know you like to know what's going on, and I know that it helps to have access to your medical records. And Roger and I, almost at the exact same time, were like, nope, make it unshareable. Like in unison, we're like, nope, go ahead, do it. This is the most important thing. I was talking to my dietitian in the appointment that we just had, and I told her, I'm like, I'm trying to see it as a good sign that I was so worried about this and that we were so adamant about speaking up and that Roger was able to help me advocate so well and that we had taken time to write that out on a piece of paper to hand to them just so there was no mistaking exactly how important and how vital it was for me not to know my weight. Once I got home and had been able to take a shower, which was, oh my gosh, adventures in pain. Horribly trying to take a shower because I am having trouble moving this arm at all right now without pain at this site, but that will resolve hopefully within a few to several days. Roger had to go run a few errands yesterday once I was out of the shower and in bed and resting, and he knew that I was going to be safe here at home. He had a few things he had to go out to do, but I was texting my coach and I'm like, as predicted, I'm now on this mental high. I'm having that mental high that you get when you restrict, whether it's intentional, whether it's unintentional, whether it's for a medical ordered reason. If you have a restrictive eating disorder, that wire in your brain just gets tripped that fast. That's the best way I can describe it, is you get this like high and you're like, oh, this feels nice. This works. This is something I need to keep doing. This is the only thing that's actually given me any sense of calm or peace in the past several months, but specifically the past month or so when I've not known my weight. I knew that despite the fact that my ED brain was screaming at me, I had to find a way to eat. It was non-negotiable. That's why I emailed my dietitian the night before. That's why I was texting my coach yesterday morning and then right after surgery as well once I got home, because I knew that I needed that accountability, because I was aware that this was going to happen, because that is how it biologically works when you have a restrictive eating disorder. I said, just wanted to also say, aside from the post-op pain, I literally am on a physical high right now from not being able to eat, and food is the absolute last thing I want to think about. So I'm in the kitchen trying to get something anyway. And then I just added a note and said it was even more complicated because I couldn't even use my right arm. But that in and of itself is not a reason to not eat. And it was as I was talking to her, as we were talking back and forth, she was just kind of helping coach me through and keep me as calm as possible. I literally took a spoon and just got a bite of something and ate it just so I could break that cycle of this mental high that is fueled by disorder, even though it wasn't the disorder that made me not eat yesterday. It was a medical necessity. Anyway, I sent her a message that said, hey, okay, I at least got through the first bite, so I think the rest of it will be, if not easier, at least somewhat more manageable right now, because I know it has to happen, and I at least was able to break that initial, okay, I'm dealing with this disordered mental high from restriction, so what can I do? Take the opposite action, because all that my ED brain wanted me to do is to continue to not eat. So what did I have to do in that moment? Eat. It's so simple. It's also not easy in any way, but simple. Yes, absolutely. And that's a distinction that can be annoying sometimes, I know. So if you get annoyed when you hear me say that it's simple, but it's not easy, I'm sorry. But know that I have been in the position many times where I have been annoyed at that statement, but it doesn't change the fact that it's true. Because I have a feeling if you're on this channel, you might be able to tell anyone else the very simple, as in you know what they are, steps to go through recovery, specifically from a restrictive eating disorder. And at the most basic level, that is eat. And when you feel like not eating, eat and nourish your body. Obviously, there's a lot more to it. But when it comes to the very basic tenets of nourishment and nutrition and recovery, it actually is very simple. You just have to nourish your body, even when and especially when you don't feel like you want to, because that's usually a sign that your disorder is trying to get back in and say, nope, you don't really need this. You don't need to trust your team. You don't need to do any of that. And that's just not the case. Which brings me to my next point. Something else that I did went back to one of the tools that has been helpful for me extremely in recovery, and one that I've not been able to return to quite as often recently, but that is dialoguing between the eating disorder voice and the healthy self voice. I was going to use my other arm to illustrate both sides here, but again, can't move this arm without pain, and thankfully I remembered that. So eating disorder voice, healthy self voice. Pretend that I've got both sides there. Did that dialoguing, and the point of dialoguing, of course, is to, first of all, get on paper what the eating disorder voice is telling you. And I'll admit, it took me over an hour to get through this dialoguing, but one thing that I've learned, while that's not ideal, is it takes the time it takes, and the point of it is to get to a place where you are ending the dialogue between the eating disorder voice and the healthy self voice, in a place where the healthy self voice is having a victory, and it just takes the time it takes. That's one thing we have learned with me over the past 9 or so months. Dialoguing just takes however long it takes for me to get to that place, and it is an extremely useful tool, but it's only useful if I'm able to actually play it out all the way. So thankfully I was able to do that. And this is a strategy that you may be familiar with if you're on this channel, if you're in recovery, if you've done any type of recovery work with a therapist, or just in general, watching things online on YouTube or elsewhere. It's something that Carolyn Costin talks about a lot in her 8 Keys to Recovery from an Eating Disorder book and workbook, and then also in general as well. So it's super helpful, and sometimes it's a way that you're able to connect to the healthy self side of your brain that is in there somewhere, even though you have so much trouble believing that it's there, because all you're hearing on a day-to-day basis is the eating disorder voice screaming at you. And honestly, this past month of not having my scale has been so much harder than I even thought it would be. I have many times been screaming like, God, please just prove to me that this is going to be worth it. Please prove to me this is going to be worth it. I know you exist. There have been moments where I've told him, please prove to me that you care. And I hesitate a little bit sharing that, because I feel shame sharing that, because I know God cares. I know he cares. But I share it to illustrate how desperate I have felt, because that tangible known is not something that I have. And it's a really crappy thing to have as a tangible known. It's a horrible thing to have as the one tangible known in your life to hold on to every day. But it doesn't mean that my days still don't feel horribly just off and wrong. I mentioned that in the previous vlog about getting rid of my scale in the first place. But one of my homework assignments for my coach this week was actually to do a dialogue, and it was specifically supposed to be about all of the scale things and all of the ways that has just been completely dominating my mental space, because I have not been able to focus on anything else except how horrible I feel. My body image is trash right now. I feel like I can physically feel and also see it changing every single day. I know that while that is probably happening to a degree, I know that my brain is also seeing it magnified much more than it actually is happening. It doesn't make it any easier that I know that, though. Again, knowledge, doing, there's a disconnect there. Since this surgery was a total surprise thing that we didn't know was going to happen when she first said that assignment on Monday, I'm like, okay, this is the perfect opportunity to start dialoguing about the scale thing, and also about being told not to eat, because that's something that was a curveball that was thrown my way. Let's dialogue it out, and let's see if we can get to a healthy self victory. So just to give you an idea, the very first thing that the ED voice said in this dialogue was, "You're having surgery today. It's so awesome that you were given a pass not to eat. It's the perfect excuse, and anesthesia makes you sick for hours, so you don't need to try to eat anything for a long time after you get home either. I mean, you don't even really need to eat at all this day. This is a perfect opportunity to do what you know works." Do you know how exhausting it is to live with that voice in your head every second of every day, and to be absolutely beaten up by that voice, but then to also be terrified of letting go of it because it's what you know? Sorry, that just hit me, because yes, when I got home, I was on that high. It did feel like it was working, in that it gave me a sense of calm and peace, because that's what restrictive eating disorders do when you have the biology that's predisposed to them. Doesn't mean that it's actually working for long-term life. So my first healthy self-response, and I'm not going to read you my whole dialoguing, just giving an example of the first 2 back and forth so you can know what I'm talking about here, said, "Yes, I'm having unexpected surgery today, and even a few days ago, after the really hard day I had, I would have possibly been thankful for the opportunity to not have to eat. But instead, I have to live in fear, because this This isn't something that I can control or change, and I know that going without food for any extended period of time gives you license to take over my brain and convince me that not eating is the answer. Then I kept going back and forth between the ED voice and the healthy self voice, and as always, there was a lot of arguing between those voices and semantics. Almost always in my dialoguing at some point, because I am such a word person and I love to twist words, and I'm very intentional when I choose my words, so also is my eating disorder self, because it is part of me. Now, it's a part of me that I'm trying to distance from and figure out how to flip around the attributes that drive my eating disorder to actually serve my life instead. That's the ultimate goal. But I am someone who latches onto semantics, so sometimes I kind of laugh when I'm dialoguing because the eating disorder voice tries to get so sassy and like snappy comeback, but then the healthy self voice always totally obliterates it. Even if I don't feel strong in it, I at least have that sense of, oh no, you don't get to say that, you don't get to use words against me, I'm going to use words and twist them against you. So I was typing it on Google Docs instead of writing it out because I knew it was going to be a long one. And at one point from the healthy self voice, I just said, "You're a lying liar who lies." And I put the next sentence in bold font and said, "Everything you say is a," in bold font, "bold-faced lie." And then I wrote after that, "See, I can have fun with words too." And I only share that little anecdote because it's so powerful when you can channel the parts of your personality that you know are inherent to you that your eating disorder has tried to turn against you, and instead use it against that to reclaim your freedom and to reassert your healthy self victory. And yeah, it may have taken me over an hour to get there, but I got there, and boy did I get there. My last healthy self response, I was just scrolling through it here, is several paragraphs long, and that's pretty typical for me. I'm very long-winded in my dialoguing, but it's effective, and like I said, it takes the time it takes. So between doing that and talking to my coach yesterday morning, and then Roger helping me prepare to advocate and explain all the things about not needing to know my weight, we were as prepared yesterday as we could have been. And honestly, it went a lot better than I thought it was going to, based on my immediate shutdown, almost panic attack reaction to when I was first told, by the way, don't eat or drink anything past midnight on Tuesday, the day before. I was planning on making like a 1-month update without my scale vlog. I did not plan on it being in this situation, but the situation ended up giving me the perfect opportunity to address that, and that side of things could not have gone more smoothly. I have so much respect for everyone that was helping us at the hospital yesterday. They were all so kind, so willing to accommodate, literally took scissors to my discharge papers before handing them to my husband because they cut out the part that had my weight and BMI on it, but they also handed them to him just in case that there was something that they had missed. And it just blew my mind how accommodating they were and how understanding they were, and how much they didn't make me feel weird about it. They didn't question me on it. They're just like, okay, if that's what we need to do, we'll find a way to do it. And I am definitely someone who finds it really hard to give myself credit for anything. I still kind of struggle giving myself credit for this because Roger's the one who actually communicated it, because again, I was in major sensory overload mode and not able to communicate very well. But the fact that we planned ahead of time, the fact that I planned with Roger and we talked about exactly what he would need to say if I was unable, he helped me write all that down, that in of itself is showing that my healthy self is in there, even though on a day-to-day basis, more often than not, and I'm talking 99.9% of the time right now, I don't feel like it's there, and I don't feel like any of this is worth it, and I don't feel like there's a point to it, or that it's necessary, or that I'm worth it. The fact that I took all of those precautions to advocate for myself, to make sure I did not take the risk of undoing this past month of not knowing my weight, even though I don't feel like there's been progress made, I knew that it was not smart to put myself in the position or take the risk of potentially undoing any work that maybe I'm not seeing, but that has actually been done over the past month, and honestly over the past 9 months. My appointment with my dietitian was earlier this morning than most appointments that I do. I just got to go crash and let my body rest and recover from literal surgery yesterday. And again, it was very minor, so it's not a huge recovery, but it is still something that requires being still and resting. And while my mind does not want me to do that, because mentally my disorder still wants me to constantly be moving, I physically couldn't do that even if I was trying to. So in that sense, I'm glad that I'm dealing with a little bit of post-op pain. That is not me in any way saying that I am glad that we had to have this unplanned surgery / removal, or that I am dealing with this pain. Obviously, that's not the case, but I am thankful that it's not worse, and yet also still thankful that it is still noticeable enough that it is a very literally painful reminder that I cannot afford to push my body. And it's not that I can even afford to do that on days when I'm not dealing with extra pain like this, but sometimes having that tangible reminder there, even though I don't want to bow to the ED voice in my brain, it still gives me that permission that that voice demands when it comes to resting and being still and not moving. And ultimately, I really need to get better at that. And the only way to do that is to practice. And when you're in a position where you have no choice but to rest and to recover and to stay still, you get some practice in whether you want to or not. Again, everything yesterday went better than we could have expected, especially them being so understanding and accommodating about me not needing to know my weight. It has now been over a month since I've had my scale. I'm still mentally and internally freaking out about it. Sometimes externally, sometimes the meltdowns show up very externally, but point is, stuck to my guns, advocated, kept myself safe, and protected this recovery that on a day-to-day basis, I don't even necessarily feel like is worth it. I definitely don't feel like I'm worth it, but I know that I have to trust Roger, I have to trust my team, and I have to do whatever I can to protect whatever progress may have been made, even if I can't objectively see it. And the fact that I was so worried about these things potentially sending me backwards shows that yes, again, the healthy self is in there somewhere. There has been some progress made, even if it's hard for me to see and channel on a day-to-day basis. And as I so often quote Dory from Finding Nemo, I gotta just keep swimming, just keep swimming, just keep swimming, swimming, swimming. What do? We swim, swim, swim. See you in the next one.